I'm willing to bet that when most of you think of ancient Greek helmets, you think of something like the Corinthian helmet, which has sort of become the icon and staple of the ancient Greek hoplite, and it would seem that the ancients would do that as well. However, there's another helmet which seems to sort of lurk in the shadows and seems to be quite forgotten and neglected in today's world, that was actually very popular in the period. Hi, my name's Adam, I'm an ancient Greek reenactor and an experimental archaeologist, and today we're going to delve into the sort of neglected helmet of the ancient Greek world, being the Illyrian helmet. Now, what makes this helmet so particularly interesting is that it's basically non-existent in the artistic world. There are very, very few depictions of this style of helmet in contemporary artworks. We have a few sculptural depictions, but the vast majority of helmets depicted in art are, of course, of the Corinthian type, or even other styles like the Chalcidian helmet seem to be a lot more popular than the Illyrian. But what makes this helmet really stand out as something different is that it's an estimated 1/3 of all of the archaeological finds of contemporary helmets are of the Illyrian type. This is an absolutely huge number, which would indicate that this helmet was incredibly popular in the time period. Though it may not look as sort of heroic or epic as the Corinthian helmet, which is probably why it wasn't as depicted in art at the time as well, again, about 1/3 of our archaeological finds seem to be this helmet, which indicates that it was incredibly popular, and I think for good reason. This helmet is a very practical helmet. It's not flashy, it's not, as sort of intimidating as other styles of helmets, but it's sort of a good mixture of protection and comfort. Now, Illyrian-esque helmets go back into the Bronze Age with even the famous sort of boar tusk dendra panoply helmet, sort of resembling the coverage and overall shape of the Illyrian helmet. However, we definitely sort of start to see its early ancestors appearing in the geometric period, and this style really sort of taking off in the archaic period. And this helmet is really often neglected and sort of forgotten when it comes to ancient Greece, and it sort of seems to be by the artists and culture of the time. This isn't a very commonly depicted helmet, but it seems to be a very commonly worn one. This helmet might not be as protective, you might think it leaves you really exposed, but at the same time it allows for excellent visibility, breathability, and airflow, which are all very crucial on the battlefield, especially if we're talking about the Mediterranean, where it is incredibly hot. And this helmet is starting to get more represented in the reenactment world, I think for similar reasons as to why it was so popular for the ancients themselves. This helmet is actually my dad's. He commissioned it before Plataea last year because he wanted a helmet whilst we were in Greece that was, easier and sort of less restrictive on his vision and breathability and sort of cooling. And there are a couple other reenactors who are favouring this style of helmet, and I think it's highly likely that many contemporaries would have chosen this helmet for similar reasons, especially if we're talking about a fighter who isn't necessarily going to be on the front lines. If we go into sort of classical phalanx style formation, if you're a couple rows back or at the back of your army, you don't necessarily need a fully, armoured body. You can afford to have those more less protective styles. Even some who fight on the front lines would probably choose to have this style of helmet. They would value situational awareness and sort of comfort over protection. And again, even though it seems very open, it is actually very protective. We certainly see some helmets, for instance the Pylos helmet, which have absolutely no face protection at all. They're just sort of a conical hat. And something that's very important to remember as well is a majority of this fighting style, your face is either shielded or very easily covered by your shield. So you don't necessarily need full face coverage in this style of warfare. And from the design of the cheek plates, this is a little bit atypical. Typically they aren't curved. We do have one archaeological find that I'm aware of that has curved cheeks, and actually one artistic depiction that has curved cheeks. Most of the time it's sort of a straight line. But what this allows is, if a sword slash, for instance, hits here of the helmet, it's actually not hitting your face, it's getting the cheeks intercepting it. So even though your middle face is open, unless there's actually a stab that comes into that, you're pretty safe on the whole. And this then, of course, has the pros of allowing you to see better, breathe better, and cool better. Of course, temperature regulation is very important in combat, especially if you're in a very, very hot climate. If you get heat stroke on the battlefield, start getting dizzy, blurry vision, you're in a lot of trouble. So this is no joke. This is the reason why some people look at this style of armor and go, it's not very protected, there's not a lot of padding under there. But the issue is the more layers, the more coverage you have, the hotter you will be. So let's run over a little bit more in depth on this helmet. This is more of an archaic style helmet. As we can see, it doesn't have opened up ears. This isn't always true, but typically when we venture into later on in the classical period, the ears get opened up. So that is sort of an indicator that this helmet, is going to be around, anywhere from around 600 to around 480 BC-ish. So type of helmet that you would see in the Persian Wars. And it is really quite characterized by a couple things. The, of course, very open face is very sort of characteristic of the Illyrian helmet. And also this ridge that the crest sits on. There's a few possible reasons for that. It could be a throwback to, for instance, earlier sort of styles of this helmet were two pieces sort of attached and riveted, so it could sort of be a throwback. Obviously, it makes a frame for a crest to sit, and often these helmets are outfitted with sort of pins and hooks that are likely used for fastening a crest, as demonstrated here. However, we also see non-longitudinal crests depicted on these helmets. For instance, we sometimes see the J crest as well, so this isn't necessarily solely for a crest. But those are sort of the two most characteristic parts of this helmet. It's not nearly as sort of elegant and fancy as other styles of helmets. And if I'm being honest, I never really used to like this helmet, but it really has grown on me. And you can see some archaeological finds that are a little bit more fancy than embossed and actually look really, really nice. Now, this image of the hoplite isn't really one that we often think of, but again, it is highly likely that maybe not a majority of hoplites wore this helmet, but a large amount would have likely been outfitted with this style of helmet. And I think it does make a lot of sense. Is it the helmet that I myself would choose? No, I'd probably choose a Chalcidian helmet, if anything, as much as I absolutely love the Corinthians. It would be either sort of a more a Myros-style Corinthian or a Chalcidian is probably what I would choose. But I can definitely see why this helmet was so popular. Now, as I said, this helmet is not made for me. It's actually made for my dad, so it won't fit me perfectly. But to give you an idea of what it looks like, I can put it on. Probably looks a little bit silly on me, as again, it's not fitted to my head, so forgive that. However, it is a very comfortable helmet to wear. It is notably, I can see a lot. I'm blocked a little bit in my peripherals by the sort of cheek plates that come down, but overall my breathing, my visibility, everything is pretty much not affected. It is genuinely a very comfortable helmet to wear. You're not restricted in really any way at all. I would personally prefer one that has a little bit more frontal protection, but I can again definitely see why this is so popular. I think it's interesting to see how it's starting to take up more popularity in the reenactment world, and I think that that can be reflected into the contemporary lens as well. At the end of the day, we're all human, so for the same reasons that some would desire a more open, breathable helmet, that can be sort of projected into the people of the past as well. And that is really something that I just sort of love about the sort of ancient Greek world, is how everyone would have looked slightly different. Everyone would have had their own personal choices and preferences, and everyone's sort of panoply would reflect that. There also comes down that a helmet like this is probably cheaper to make, as it takes less sort of crafting skill. You don't have to sculpt a full frontal mask. So that's sort of that munitions grade armor as well, of people who are maybe a little bit poorer, may decide, cheaper helmet. But I think it's highly likely that many aristocrats would have chosen a helmet like this as well. So it might not be the most flashy or sort of stereotypical hoplite helmet, but there is no doubt that this helmet was incredibly popular. And it might change the way that you view hoplites in your mental image, in the sense that a lot of them wouldn't be outfitted in the sort of stereotypical hoplite equipment that we think of. Hope that you enjoyed this video on the Illyrian helmet. There will be more helmet overview videos coming out very soon on the channel. Thank you very much for watching this video. A special thanks to our channel members for their extra support. It truly means a lot. And I'll hopefully see you in the next video.